Chris Cuomo here. Welcome to NewsNation. I hear you. You keep saying there's too much noise. These shows are not talking enough about what really matters. All gotcha, all the time, all ephemeral, all salacious. You're right. Too much heat, not enough light. You want to go deep? Let's get after it. I want to talk to you about something I never have before, and I haven't heard it discussed. There's a growing threat, and people don't address it. They frankly dismiss it. Now, tonight we have the latest on the manhunt for the CEO assassin, the Penny trial, and where the Trump cabinet picks suggest he will take us. Each and all of these stories, like October 7th, like Trump's assassination, they are all metaphors for the same proposition. Who are we becoming? My answer is admittedly being offered early, but it is accurate. The CEO assassination is horrible for Brian Thompson, for his loved ones. But it also raises questions. First, about how people see the tactics of the insurance machine. And I hope the industry hears them, because the system is regarded by many as rigged against the patient. I've reported on this. Actually, the president of NewsNation, Mike Korn, started off with me at ABC reporting in part on insurance tactics. Personally, right now, my family is fighting for coverage for a surgery for my kid. So I get it. But the bloodlust, the celebration of a man's murder speaks to something way more threatening to you and me than anything an insurance company could ever do.
It's actually impossible to know the amount of murders that Brian Thompson is responsible for. That man is responsible for more deaths than every known serial killer in the United States combined.
The guy was a serial killer. He had blood on his hands. He had millions of people's blood on his hands.
He had over $100 million in assets. He knew what he was doing. This is just his bed, and he's lying in it. The ground, actually.
Remember, this man was on the way to give a speech to investors about all the money he made from denying healthcare coverage to people. He was a ghoul. People are sick and tired of their suffering being monetized.
These are only the ones we can show you because TikTok will strike stuff where people are openly talking about being happy someone's dead. There's plenty of it. Now, many will shake their head and say, the furious few, keyboard bullies, more proof social media is toxic. Okay, but I see it as much bigger, badder, especially because the rabid response to the CEO killing is not an isolated event. It is the third flashpoint evincing a pattern. October 7th, Trump's assassination attempt, and now the United Healthcare CEO assassination. All three were not just suggestive of rampant rudeness, departure from the accepted principle here that we remain humane no matter what matter of inhumanity is confronted. Otherwise, what separates the virtue from the vice, the good from the evil? The reactions we have seen are signs that many have lost the plot of how things change in a constitutional republic. We have entered the era in America of an acceptance of violence as a legitimate way to change systems or policies. What is being defined as the oppressor. We have a word for that in the law. When violence is embraced as an accepted means for political or regime change, that is called terrorism. These people celebrating the CEO's death are embracing terrorism, like those saying Israelis got what they deserve on October 7th. Not in terror camps, on our campuses, they're saying it. Here, those seeing Hamas terrorists as freedom fighters, baffled at first, right? We were. How could people be so confused? But maybe they're not confused at all. Maybe they see Hamas as the good guys because they themselves embrace the fundamentalism and terrorism. I even noticed pro-Palestine accounts celebrating the CEO's assassination. Same with when Trump was shot. How could people pretend it was fake or lament that he lived? I reached out to the president-elect, who, by the way, does not like me and may even have me with his only the best bunch on some target list. But I called him anyway. Why? To say I was sorry that his near death was seen as a near miss for success by so many. Now I get it. Look, there's nothing wrong with opposing Trump personally and politically. He is wildly unpopular for good reason. And what he inspired on January 6th and what those Fugazi patriots did are examples of this growing problem I'm telling you about. But, when you start to see the death of who you oppose as acceptable impetus for change, you're now what we are supposed to be opposing. Many on the left keep warning there are signs of Christian fundamentalism in Trump's speeches and cabinet picks. Okay. And what Trump's rally at MSG was really about was a Nazi dog whistle. And now we've crossed the line. Why exaggerate like that when the truth is enough for political scrutiny and disqualification of Trump? Because it's not just about winning. Making Trump Hitler is necessary to raise the stakes to what is worth killing for. Like blaming all insurers for being mass murderers, all Jews, greedy killers who control the media. You have to go big to justify the ultimate rejection. This is an old problem, really old. It's why a Roman emperor dealt with the seething cries for payback among his council by issuing a truth that is echoed through the ages for the best revenge. The best way to avenge yourself is to not become like them. Marcus Aurelius. This is virtue, righteous. This is progress. This is Judeo-Christian ethic. This is Gandhi, Frederick Douglass, MLK, Jesus. The need for superhuman and super powerful messengers is because of how powerful a message they're up against. And we're seeing it now here, when it seems right that Jews get raped and killed and burned. And when I say that, look at the comments on my posts. Who says it's fake? The numbers were exaggerated, that Israelis did it, or that, of course, this is what the oppressor gets from Americans. Notice how many felt the same about Trump. Hitler and Nazis who want to destroy the democracy, create a dictatorship. And now with the CEO, from the river to the sea, all the messages about the CEO only being the first. Suggestions, 1 million insurance employees should be killed. They're all part of it, right? Like the Jews, like the maggots. The derisive way of describing Trump voters, like the trans and other freaks. It's all the same expression of extremism, of fundamentalist beliefs we usually associate with who? Islamist animals. Now, why am I conflating the aggressions of the trans and the CEO? Why am I conflating it all? Because we don't have Democrats or Republicans like we did. The fringe minorities of each haven't just been magnified by social media. They're not just magnified minorities. They become force multiplied in calling for extreme notions of change, and worse, how change should be made. Ask Iranian refugees how they went from a free society to a rancid regime in charge now. Many fundamentalist strongholds were once cosmopolitan, secular. Why do the Russians like what's coming out of the fringe right pod space? Why were they offering those guys money? Why is that space in some independent media so insistent on telling you anything but them cannot be believed? And then what they want you to believe are conspiracies that do everything to compel you to reject everything about this country. To be replaced by what? I see it. We need to stop it. That's why I'm on the political party so much, to stop feeding their fringes for short-term advantage. Why I try to make conversation with opposing viewpoints. To show there's so much more that we share than what some are trying to make worthy of us tearing ourselves apart. to cheer for the assassination of a businessman, to wish your president had been shot in the head, to feel good about Jews being slaughtered on October 7th. There is something going on here that has happened in other places, and it leads one way, away from freedom and toward fundamentalist, violent extremism. So, that's my context of looking at the latest on who murdered the CEO, our first story. But for me, it's all about why. Now, the reporting that's newest, police believe the killer's possible motive was that he was a disgruntled employee or a client of the health insurance company. Plays exactly into my theory. However, questions are still driving speculation. Was he working alone? Was he doing this job for someone else? Police have just found the suspected killer's backpack by the carousel in Central Park. This is key because the backpack could hold more evidence, right? It had the DNA, and obviously you know that that's the way you find somebody. The NYPD announced earlier today that they don't believe he's still in New York City. Why? Police have video of the suspect exiting Central Park on a bike at 77th Street, video of him on West 86, the Upper West Side of Manhattan, where he loses the bike and walks. He then gets in a taxi, goes 100 blocks north to a Port Authority bus center. Interstate buses go through there. There's no video of him leaving, so they assume he got on a bus. They're trying to figure out which one. They were also able to secure a swab of what they believe to be the suspect's DNA from a water bottle that he left behind at the crime scene that we told you about yesterday, and his burner cell phone, which may contain touch DNA, and they got to break into it and figure out what else is in there. Authorities are doing all of that right now, and the more they give us, the more we'll give you. Now, what about what's in the hostel? What about where he is headed and why? Could he have a plan to do this again? Let's process what this all means to the better minds. Retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent James Galliano, professional bounty hunter Zeke Unger, forensic pathologist Dr. Michelle Dupre. It's good to have you all, and thank you. Jimmy, let me start with you. With what you're seeing now, how does it fill out the picture of who this is and what he's about?
Chris, I think every single day the detectives in New York City are doing a great job of releasing more and more details. And why are they doing this? It's crowdsourcing. The bad thing about this is that the aperture has expanded. Instead of now just believing he's on the island of Manhattan, which is about 13 miles long and 2 miles wide, we believe that he got onto a bus, an interstate bus, and could be anywhere in the United States. Now, via crowdsourcing with the additional details, the vanity effect, the fact that he pulled the mask down inside the hostel, and we have a good photo of him to share that. I'm pretty certain by now the FBI is involved, especially with the interstate travel on this. But, Chris, there is an abundance, a veritable plethora of different things that have been harvested. You mentioned latent fingerprints, DNA. DNA is probative evidence. There are a lot of things that they can be chasing down right now. But, again, the crisis site, the individual that you're on the manhunt on, that is expanded now across all 50 states and beyond.
Jimmy, I don't understand this, but my producer was telling me that there's reporting that his weapon may have been a veterinary gun. I've never heard of that before. He didn't shoot the guy with darts. Is there such a thing?
Yeah, I'm unfamiliar with that, Chris. I mean, obviously the size of it, somebody could probably mistaken that for a tranquilizer gun or a dart gun that you see, you know, on the Serengeti in Africa when they're trying to bring an elephant down to work on him. No, this thing had bullets in it, and the CEO was hit by bullets, so it was absolutely a firearm.
Hey, Doc, let me ask you something. How do you analyze the idea of whether or not this is someone who has repeat offense motives?
Well, one of the ways that you would do that, of course, is you need to find out who this person is. But you also look at their pattern of behavior. You look at what they did. You look at the way that they approached the crime scene, the way that they approached the suspect, or the victim rather, and then you find out if there are any other similarities, perhaps in something like VICAP, a universal database that compares crime similarities across the nation. And if there are clues, then that's where you might find them.
Zeke, finding this guy, what do you see from the movements and pluses and minuses of his modus operandi that makes it easier or harder to catch him?
This is a very well-planned assassination. I personally believe that the individual had training, his mannerisms, he was cool and collective. He came into the city very stealthy. He left very stealthy with a plan. You could tell the way he handled his weapon, even as it malfunctioned, he was able to continue. I don't believe this is his first rodeo. Whether or not he was brought in to handle this, or whether it's a grudge assassination, that's yet to be seen, but we don't want to speculate, we want to investigate. And as all the data starts coming in, the U.S. Marshals are heavily involved in the case, which is a major plus. I think it's going to unfold, and as the days go on, we're going to know more and more about the shooter and his whereabouts.
But do you think right now, when you're trying to figure out where he went from that Port Authority and you look at the bus lines, are you looking for ones that were headed to where there are other major commercial headquarters?
I think right now it's up in the air. I really do. We can't speculate. We have to wait for positive data. You could be chasing a red herring and go in the completely wrong direction. I think the Marshal Service and law enforcement has it under control. They've made great progress in a short amount of time. This is going to be a lengthy investigation. I don't think we're going to see anything happen relatively quick as far as an arrest. I do believe there will be an arrest, but law enforcement is going to have to go through a lot of data and figure it out.
Jimmy, do you agree with Zeke that from what he's seen, some of which is not public yet, that sure, this could be social justice warrior or aggrieved person, also could be someone who was hired to do this, which Zeke believes is becoming more of a suggestion?
Absolutely. So, the way it works in investigations, Chris, to Zeke's point, you follow the evidence bereft of fear or favor. You go in the direction of the evidence. Now, motive is important, and I know that we're all trying to kind of distill this down to the granular level and try to figure out what motivated this person. You don't need it to prove a crime. You don't need it to convict somebody. And in this instance, Chris, I think you talked about it right at the top, where you talked about terrorism. Was this a potential effort, as it appears to be, to coerce a government or to coerce an entity through violence and intimidation? Yes, that's what it appears to be. And if that is the case, the feds will bring charges. New York State has a criminal statute on the book that they can bring charges on. But to your point, Zeke's, the most important thing is to capture this guy. He's dangerous. We know he's killed somebody already. And look, he's already impacted things. Healthcare companies are scrubbing their bios of their executives off of their websites. All the bios, the images of them. And this is probably going to cause healthcare companies to think differently. Is that a good thing? Activists would say yes. But you also have to look at it from the fact that that's criminal activity, terrorism, or the threat of intimidation or violence to affect change.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot more of it. All right. Each and all, thank you very much, especially on a Friday night. As we get more information, we'll continue the narrative, and I appreciate you pointing out that we got to go on the facts. But why he did this matters so much, because if it's part of this emerging trend of people being okay with violent change, we got bigger problems coming our way. Take care. Have good weekends. All right, we're going to take a break. 4 minutes and 5 seconds, then we'll be back. The Daniel Penny case. This is also a test case, okay? He's on trial. They spent days deliberating over whether or not his choke of this man on the train who was harassing people was something that he should have known could kill him. Is he guilty of homicide? Is he a cold-hearted killer? Did he know he could have killed him and did it anyway? The jury, though, it's all about them now. After days, they can't figure it out. So the judge just made a huge ruling. But people think this may be a bad thing for Mr. Penny. Next. Case is more than just a New York City crime story. It is another sign of the times, a test case about where we're headed. Why? It's about what you demand is punished and why, and what message are you sending about how people should get involved in what they see in society. Is Penny some cold-blooded killer? Is that why they keep referring to him as a Marine, to say he was trained to kill? Or is he someone who stepped in to try to do the right thing when one of his fellow citizens was in need, like the other two guys who were with him? Jurors have been deliberating for the past 4 days. They cannot come to a decision on manslaughter 2, meaning he knew that this could kill the guy and he did it anyway. There is a second charge, criminally negligent homicide, meaning he should have known that doing this could kill the guy. Now, 30-year-old Jordan Neely is absolutely dead, okay? And he was being choked by Neely. So why haven't they decided? Well, that's very interesting. They asked the judge, what does a reasonable person mean? What does that suggest? To me, it suggests that they're having an argument about what you would do in that situation. Now, the judge granted a motion by the prosecutors to dismiss the first charge. So that's out now. People are misunderstanding what the judge said. They said, no, he added a charge. No, he gave what's called an Allen charge, not a charge like one of these counts. It's an instruction to the jury. It's also called a dynamite charge. It comes out of a Supreme Court case from 100 years ago, where he is allowed to say to them, hey, go back in there and give it your best effort and be open to changing your mind. And try to come to a conclusion. You know, the concern with the Allen charge is that you make them come to a conclusion that they're not comfortable with. So then they still can't do it. The prosecutor comes and says, get rid of the first charge. So now the judge says, come back Monday, deliberate on the second lesser charge, criminally negligent homicide. The judge told the jurors, what I'm going to do is this manslaughter in the second degree is dismissed. Remember, the DA was okay with this. So why did he ever charge him with it in the first place? You are now free to consider count 2. Whether that makes any difference, I have no idea, but I direct you to focus deliberations on count 2, render a verdict on that one. The defense then asked for a mistrial, strongly objected to the dismissal of the charge, right? Saying this was essentially elbowing the jury to reach a compromised verdict. The defense also raised the question of whether or not a juror spoke to the press. It would also be grounds for mistrial. So what does it all mean? Trial attorney Misty Maris, defense attorney Arthur Aidala, jury consultant Susan Constantine. Thank you each and all. Susan, I start with you, asking what is a reasonable person? Am I right about what that could be suggestive of in terms of the state of play in the jury room?
Yeah, so, those jurors that are in there deliberating, they're thinking, what would you do? Okay, what would be reasonable under that situation? Because most of them are traveling on that same train every single day. So what's happening behind closed doors is there certainly is a split. There's no doubt. We've got one extreme that guilty, right, for manslaughter. And then you've got others that are on the complete far right versus left. So now what's happening, I don't know, I would think that the jurors be a little bit confused because I've never seen this happen before. Now they've got to go back and then have to go and re-deliberate again. And hopefully they can either come to a compromise or we're just going to have a hung jury again.
Arthur, you and I have talked about this a lot. What do you make of the suggestion of this is bad for Penny, man? This judge is basically telling them that this is come back and try it again on this. And they're throwing out the other charge. And this guy should be walking away. He did what we want people to do. He got involved with a bad guy. The two other guys were there. They didn't seem upset by what Penny was doing. Why would it be reasonable for him to see otherwise? This is a bad day for Penny.
I'm going to look at the glass half full. When they ask for the reasonableness, it goes to the two-part test regarding self-defense. That comes out of the Bernie Getz case. Would a reasonable person, does Penny feel threatened in that situation, so he's entitled to self-defense? And then the second part is, would a reasonable person in that situation feel threatened and can act in self-defense? So they're struggling with the self-defense. And here, Chris, is why I'm going to look at the glass half full. If they're struggling with self-defense on manslaughter in the second degree, it also applies to criminally negligent homicide. And they were told, if you can't agree on manslaughter, you're not allowed to look at criminally negligent homicide. The prosecutor took the unique, it's never happened before that we can find in the record books, saying, Judge, it's okay, you could dismiss the top count. Because they're dismissing it and he's allowing it, there is no appeal to that. Now Penny goes from a maximum of 15 years to a maximum of 4. So he could go to bed tonight knowing he's probably not going to jail at all. And now those jurors are going to come back on Monday. And if there are still some jurors who believed there was a fear and a reasonable person was in fear of their lives or someone else's life, he acted appropriately, it could still be a hung jury.
Misty, make a smarter point.
Well, truthfully, Chris, Arthur's spot on, and I do think that the jury is grappling with that justification defense by virtue of that question regarding the reasonable person test, and that would apply. So it's not going to matter whether it's manslaughter or criminally negligent homicide. If that's what's creating the deadlock, then the deadlock will exist for criminally negligent homicide too. But the reason that the defense was adamant and asking for a mistrial when the deadlock occurred as opposed to dismissal of the charge, and the reason the defense objected, is because it's teeing up the case for a potential compromise verdict. And a compromise verdict is when jurors who believe the case should be one way and should be decided one way compromise their convictions because they want to reach an agreement. And that's why the defense was saying, well, now you're putting criminally negligent homicide, a lesser included offense, in front of this jury. Well, that's going to be something that could lead to a conviction where it otherwise might not have. And that's why we saw that argument on the record today.
Arthur, this idea that, prosecutors, they got to bring the case. No one's above the law. You always got to bring the case. To me, this is proof of, no, there's prosecutorial discretion. I don't know why they charged him with manslaughter too in the first place, but, you saw that they just walked away from their own charge. And the concern that if Penny is convicted, even if he's not going to go to prison, why would I ever want to get involved in a situation like this? So what kind of message is it sending?
And that's why I'm rooting for an acquittal. I was in the courthouse today. I went up there. I saw the defense team. I shook Mr. Penny's hand. I told him we're rooting for you because I ride the subway on a very regular basis. And there are nut jobs on a very regular basis. And, I'm not the guy who's going to go tackling somebody. I'm the one who's going to go run in between cars and hide. Okay, big shot. Take it easy. But Penny, look, there's clearly he had no intent to kill this guy. It's about carelessness when it comes to criminally negligent homicide. And I think he puts his head on the pillow tonight knowing he's not going to go to prison. However, Chris, to your point, the message that gets sent out there is just use your phone, stay out of it, take a video, and then later, after the damage is done, give it to the cops and it'll be their problem and you don't have to worry about being indicted by the Manhattan DA's office.
Susan, Ms. Constantine, last word to you. In the minds of jurors, the balancing of this is what you do and it doesn't mean you're trying to kill somebody versus, well, I would never do that to somebody and it looks like obviously it would kill them. Those are two different mindsets of people with two different types of life experience. Which one do you think is heavier influence here?
I think that most people are going to weigh on the fact that he acted appropriately. That's where I think the majority is landing right now. And we've only got one or maybe two strongholds, and they're very, very strong, and they're not going to budge. And that's why I think we're going to end up with another hung jury.
Hey, I appreciate you each and all. Thank you very much. And the people at home should know, these are the people that I call when I need to know what to say on TV. And then often I cut them out so that I seem like I know it all. But not tonight. So thank you to each and all of you. I'll talk soon. It's funny because it's true. 4 minutes and 30 seconds, then we'll be back. To pardon or not pardon, I wanted to bring somebody in who is also a mentor to me to discuss what the reasonable level of concern is about what Trump will do with this presidency, and whether or not President Biden, with his pardon, is countering that threat or adding to it. One of the best minds in political thought, and a real conservative and a journalist, Mr. Frum, joins us next. Biden's pardon, big deal. For me, it's a big deal because of how he explained it, which I think makes it a big problem. Now there's a suggestion that maybe he should pardon other people to discourage Trump and the Funky Bunch for going after them. There's an idea that I have promoted here, that if he's going to do that, he should also pardon Trump to try to give some type of reason to move past this as a tactic. Now, another question. What kind of threat could Trump really pose that are of constitutional proportions? And what does this fight with Hegseth and Gates and the guy who wants to be the head of the FBI, Kash Patel, what does it all really mean? A man I turn to for better ideas, for food for thought. Former speechwriter for President George W. Bush, current staff writer at The Atlantic, David Frum. It is good to see you, big brother.
Thank you so much for the hospitality.
Trump is not just a risk for a bad administration to you. It is much more profound. Why?
Donald Trump is the first person in American history, the first president in American history, to try to overthrow an election because he lost it. We're never going to get past that. You know, Moldova has a tradition of the peaceful transition of power that goes back to 2019. The Democratic Republic of the Congo has a tradition of the peaceful transition of power that goes back to 2019. Those are older traditions of the peaceful transition of power than the United States, because in 2020, we had a violent transition of power. And I'm not getting past that. And Donald Trump was at the center of it, and there are constitutional and legal issues that have to be litigated. He did win the election. He's going to be president, but the legal and political issues and constitutional issues don't go away.
Two things. One, he did leave. He handled it horribly, but he was gone on time for the next administration. And second, many of the things have been litigated. It's been litigated in the court of public opinion. He was elected again. Continued competitive prosecutions are killing us. Let's move past.
The court of public opinion is not a court, and we can't move past it. One of the ideas that is out there is that President Biden should pardon many people who not only did nothing wrong, but were American heroes, like Dr. Fauci, and say, well, because you're at risk of some unprincipled and illegal action, therefore we should pardon to protect you. And I can't speak for anybody, and obviously being investigated and of course prosecuted is horrible. But if I were Dr. Fauci, I would reject that pardon with indignation and say, I did nothing wrong. If they want to come after me, let them come after me. I will defend myself. I will defend myself in court. But that Dr. Fauci does not belong in the same category as the January 6th criminals.
I agree 100% about Dr. Fauci. I would take the pardon because I don't have the confidence that I would be able to escape what Trump is able to do based on what I saw the Democrats be able to do.
Look, we're all human, and we're not going to give people advice to do dangerous things. And so I'm not going to give advice, and I wouldn't criticize someone who took a pardon even if he were innocent. But the right thing to do is to refuse it. And the right thing to do is also not to offer it. If Donald Trump, as president, will weaponize the FBI to come after people like Fauci, people like Lynn Cheney, people like former chief of staff Mark Milley, people like his own chief of staff John Kelly, and say, I'm going to pardon them for political reasons. I'm going to prosecute them for political reasons. Let us have that fight. I have enough confidence in the American justice system, in the American people, to say that fight will be won. But the teaching moment will be lost, because if President Biden pardons all those people, he is telling the American people there is something to be ashamed of. Acceptance of a pardon is always an admission of guilt.
I agree. In fact, it is deemed exactly that, even under the law. But then people equally accuse Biden of playing to the same type of perfidy by bracketing the 10 years. And if he then pardons his brother, will know that what this was pardoning himself effectively. So let's put to the side that this is a unique threat. Add to it again what I said earlier, that Trump handled it horribly, but he did leave, and there was a peaceful transfer of power. And if you look at the guys he's picking, clearly they are picked out of fealty to Trump to protect him. They're not the kinds of guys who would speak to the competence it would take to overthrow and create a constitutional crisis.
Well, you have three silos of people in the Trump picks. They're the people who are perfectly respectable picks. Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, his Secretary of the Treasury. These are perfectly respectable, normal picks. The person he's picked as National Security Advisor, perfectly respectable, normal. Then there are the people who are, maybe unfortunate, bad temper, personal faults, maybe certain lack of accomplishment, but not actively dangerous to the United States. And then you get the Kash Patels, the Tulsi Gabbards, the Robert Kennedy Jr.'s. And these are people who belong nowhere near the power of the state. And sometimes they are gripped by strange conspiracy theories. Sometimes they want to use the law in ways that the law should not be used. And those people are going to be the point of the Trump spear. And I notice that the best picks are in the areas where Trump cares least, and the worst picks are in the areas where Trump cares most.
What is the worst thing that you think he could do?
The worst thing, one of the things that has happened that is already very bad is he's told Chris Wray, who's the current director of the FBI, who was appointed by Donald Trump in 2017, that he wants him out because he wants his own person at the head of the FBI. You didn't used to get that. Other presidents have said that the head of the FBI works for the people, not for the president. If Chris Wray agrees to resign or if he's pushed out, Kash Patel has made clear he will prosecute people because the president told him to, or investigate people. And an investigation is itself a terrible, terrible burden. Simply to be criminally investigated, even if you are never charged, it costs money, it costs time.
Last quick thing, David. People believe that happens now.
People can believe things that aren't true. And one of the things that has been really reprehensible about the Trump years is that Donald Trump, in order to cover up his own guilt, has said, I'm not guilty. The system is guilty. When I am charged with things, it's not because I did something wrong, because I took government documents I had no right to, or because I tried to overthrow an election. It's because you should not believe in the FBI. And there are people who believe in him enough that he is leading them to reject everything that makes America strong and a rule of law country. And that's shameful.
David Frum, I don't share the depth of your concerns, but I can't make better arguments. And I appreciate yours very much. And they are excellent food for thought for the audience. So thank you, and please come again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for the better ideas. You don't have to agree to respect where somebody is coming from and to what he's speaking about. The reason it is dangerous for Trump to do what he does about it's the system, it's not me. It feeds the fringe who are on a march of fundamentalist destruction of what we are. And I see it. And Trump has to be careful because he's feeding into it. 3 minutes, 45 seconds. Up next, a big announcement that means everything to me. And then you have your say. You know who that is? That's my daughter. Christina and I have never had anything cooler happen to us in our lives. Our daughter, Bella Cuomo, just released her first EP, Road to Paradise. This is a song, Peace. I better shut up. Just listen for a couple seconds.
Pieces I broke so long ago. Don't let myself here. I need some help here. Help me grow.
She writes all the songs herself. She's 21 years old. She just put it out. It's on like Spotify, Apple. I mean, I'm sure so many of you are parents. You know how when your kid does something, let alone when they do something that you could have never imagined having the talent to do. Because she doesn't get this from me. And I got to tell you, I've heard, my wife has a lot of talents, but nobody's asking her to go up and sing at a party. This is amazing, and it's all her. She did this all herself. I love her to death. Dusty, what do you got for me?
It's unbelievable. You know, my mother was a professional opera singer at the Met, and I cannot sing a note.
What, are you trying to one-up me?
No, I'm just saying it doesn't come from genes. It didn't come from you or your wife.
Well,
it came from your daughter.
That's weird
It's all
because
her.
your voice, you have such a sonorous voice that I could totally get that your mom's an opera singer. It's not like every time you speak I lose hair or anything like that.
God. Okay, we're moving on to Jim from Yonkers. Jim,
Yonkers.
save me.
What's your
Jim.
question?
You have such a sonorous voice. Yes, hi. Chris, I'd like to say about the Daniel Penny case. It's hard to get past the fact that he held the young man in a chokehold for so long. I mean, he knows, he's experienced. Question. My comment, Chris, is that the Daniel Penny case, it's hard to get past the fact that he held the young man in the hold for so long.
I got you, Jim. Here's the counter.
Yeah.
I got you. Here's the counter. There are two other guys there helping him, never told him to stop doing it. Second, there was testimony at trial that he wasn't even putting it the way he would if he wanted to choke him out, let alone kill him. Third, there was ample testimony that was not really contradicted that the man was highly active for some of it, still active for another part of it, and then still clearly conscious until almost the end. So that's the counter of it. But you are struggling with the same question that the jury absolutely is. And clearly there's a divide in thought. Next.
Okay, one more. Let's go to Fran from Hackettstown, New Jersey.
I'm on.
What's your question,
Hi.
Fran?
Hi. My comment is about the shooter, and my condolences to the family. But this was not a disgruntled employee. This is not somebody burned by the system. Those people are angry people. This guy was calm, collected, cool, and he didn't really do a good job of hiding himself, if you think about it.
Those are some very smart points. And that's why I took the opportunity to say what I said at the top of the show. I believe that there is something that is different that is happening in this country than even unrest we saw in the 60s. There was a very specific, look, some people made accusations of terror back then also, but there was a specific desire to change in terms of creating equality and what was happening with the government versus the people in the case of war or police action in Vietnam. This is different. This is people coming from both the right and the left, condoning violence because of what they don't like in politics. They're equal opposites, and they're destroying what's in the middle of them both, which is us. All right, let's go to break. Road to Paradise is my daughter's new album. I'm not telling you to get it. I just wanted you to know because I'm so proud. And that's what being a parent's all about. Quick thought when I come back, although I can't beat that one. Hard truth that fundamentalism is taking root, whether you look to your left or your right. So I'll end with a sweet one. Dusty and I are now enjoying similar amazing times where our kids are doing amazing things. Her kid has this great UFC podcast, and now